Um, I want to do a brief round of introductions. We're very excited to hear from our partners today who are going to be helping us think through how are we facing the future? How are we thinking about how to secure peace, human rights, and justice in a time of such suffering and uncertainty? And how do we face it with hope? So I want to first name that we have here today Dr. Maria Al-Abdeh of Women Now for Development in Syria. We will soon be joined by Carine Jocelyn, a partner from the Haitian Women's Collective. And we have Aisha Saifi of Salon Plus in Palestine. So in a moment, I'm going to turn to our three partners who are here to begin the discussion. And thank you for being here. But before that, I want to pass to Yifat Susskind, our Executive Director of MADRE, who will first share some opening reflections. Thank you, Yifat.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. I'm going to be brief, and thanks everybody for your patience. I just want to say that I think everyone is feeling kind of the intensity of this moment. The last couple of weeks have been, you know, just a lot of big feelings, disappointment and anger and anticipatory dread. And so I just want to say, like, whatever you're feeling in this moment, this conversation is a chance to remember that you're not alone, right? Because being part of MADRE is really being part of a worldwide network of people who are committed to making human rights a reality for everyone and ensuring that our natural resources are shared equitably and sustainably, and our partners around the world, including the amazing women that Diana just named who are here with us today, are people who know firsthand what it's like to organize for women's rights and human rights under predatory and dysfunctional government. And they are standing in solidarity with all of us in this moment. They have some vital experience and knowledge to share, including about how to leverage this moment of crisis as a turning point to get to something better. And I want to just name, before we dive into the conversation, what MADRE's approach is to the crises that this next administration promises to unleash. Because when we face as much uncertainty as we do right now, it becomes even more important to have clarity, right? Clarity about what our job is in this moment. And what we've learned over the years from our partners confronting wars and environmental disasters is that we have a three-part job to do. Number one, we need to protect the people who are going to be most in danger, whether that means transgender kids and immigrants in the US or people in the countries where we work who are going to be targeted with destructive US foreign policies. So protection. Number two, we need to support resistance. And we might need to devise some new ways to resist as familiar forms of protest and maybe even speech become criminalized and dangerous. And number three, we need to actively envision and kind of telegraph the world that we want. And that vision has to be more expansive than just naming all the things we're fighting against. We have to paint a kind of irresistible picture of what it is that we are working to create, because that's what enables transformative change. So that is MADRE's approach: protect, resist, transform. It's not linear. We're going to be doing all three of those things holistically in the time ahead, and that is how we are going to face down a second Trump administration. That same approach, protect, resist, transform, encompasses the work that our partners do with your support to meet some of the most urgent needs in their communities and create long-term positive change in like the toughest circumstances in the world, including some.
I don't know if others are experiencing this, but I seem to have lost Yifat. So hopefully we caught most of what she had to say there. Um, we'll thank her and include her in the conversation as we move forward. But I'll pivot now with our moving to our next part of the conversation, as I have the pleasure to introduce our three speakers. I think we have two of them here right now, and the third will be joining us very soon. We have Dr. Maria Al-Abdeh, who is the former executive director of Women Now for Development and a noted Syrian French feminist researcher and human rights advocate. We will soon have Jocelyn, founder of the Haitian Women's Collective and a longtime advocate for health and human services in Haiti, including reproductive health care. And we have Aisha Saifi, who's a feminist activist in Palestinian society and a renowned professional consultant, lecturer, nurse, and community midwife. So thank you for being here. As we've discussed in other spaces, in recent weeks, many of us have been trying to better understand this moment here in the US and the global impacts of the US election. We've been, trying to situate ourselves and figure out what's the best way to respond. So our first question for you, and I'll turn maybe first to you, Aisha, for your response, is what does a moment like this require from us as feminists and as human rights activists? So thank you very much, Aisha.
Thank you all. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, all of you. Before I start this valuable meeting or event, I would like to add a short on behalf of all those lives you have touched. Thank you for standing with us, for believing in us, and for making a difference together. We are fostering resilience, strength, and of course, hope.
Mhm.
I think as a Palestinian woman and mother, and living in, I think most of you hear what's going on the last year, from genocide to everything, every horrible thing. And of course, what's happening in the state. So as a feminist activist, I think we have to listen and centering for the marginalized voices, exactly like in our community. There is a voice who are with us, but we don't have the ability. So we have listening and centering on these marginalized people.
Mhm.
And we have to understand how to defend under it. And I know that MADRE and all of the other communities like Sudan, Syria, Palestine, and Haiti, and many, many countries around the world, we have to defend rights. We don't have to give up.
Mm.
And I think we already have, but we have to push it and support it to build alliances and solidarity. Even the women or the girls doesn't understand what's going on, and they don't want to interfere with or involve of these situations because they doesn't care about the political situation, who's coming to the White House or not. No, we have to have all these groups around us. And this is what we have in Palestine. We very well is advocating for policy change. We are struggling around the world, and of course, instead will become harder and harder. But together with MADRE and with other partners, we can make a difference. And of course, to use the technology and social media, it's really uh, has the impact, a huge impact on people. like the influencers, like the or short stories, or reflect our experience as partner in MADRE. Yeah, and of course, I have to say something else about ourselves as a feminist activists in our communities. We have to take care of ourselves, because most of the time we are under pressure, we are under stress, and on the same times we have feeling of hopeless from the situations, and from the pushing things like the elections in the state. And of course, finally, hope, staying hope is the most important things. Difficult. And sometimes as women and girls and LGBTs and people who doesn't has support from the community. And of course, sometimes we feel we don't have hope, but we have staying adaptive and hopeful.
Thank you for that, Aisha. I think that's a really important note. And you spoke as well to the need to, which is very core to the work we do at Madre, to think about how are we centering and prioritizing those who are most marginalized and most targeted by harm. I think that's a really important point, and to realize that we can be connected, with people around the world, and we can do something and to provide support and solidarity, as you said. I think solidarity is a very important point for maintaining our hope in difficult times. Maria, I want to turn to you and see if you have any thoughts to share on this question about what does this moment require from us as feminists and human rights activists?
Well, thank you, Diana, and thank you, Yifat, and thank you, Aisha. It's difficult to speak after Aisha and all the hope and she is bringing to us. So thank you very much, Aisha. I want to first of all to offer my solidarity and to the people of the United States, but also all feminists and marginalized people around the globe. We know that would be a fight for all of us, and I think also it's time for us to MADRE and other partners have been showing up for us for a long time. So now maybe it's also our turn to show up, because I remember after the earthquake in Syria and in a lot of different moments, I know that the first message I will always receive was from feminist partners. And I think that is very important. And that is we have the hope who keep us going, but it's also the solidarity and showing up for each other. So I think that is something that is very important, that is needed from all of us. And as well to take a deep breath and calm, because we have all the right to be angry and all the right to be depressed. But unfortunately, to change things, we need to be able to be calm, to reimagine the transformative change that Yifat was talking about. That maybe I will touch upon later. So we need to be calm and be gentle to ourselves and to the other. I would say not to fall into the game of not the game, but I would say the play of blaming and divisions, because we have seen that the enemy of human rights and the enemy of democracy have always saying like, it is your fault, it is this. And as women, we always tend to say, yes, it is our fault. We should have done this better. We should have done this in another way. Yes, I think a self-critique is very important, is very much needed to understand what could have been done better, but also to be gentle to each other and don't blame each other at all. In the case of Syria and Palestine, unfortunately, we have seen a lot of activists who stand either with Palestine, either with Syria, as human rights could be divided, So I believe that here we need each other, and we need to understand why people are different sometimes. people who are standing with Palestine and against Syria believe that Syria is the issue, the democracy in Syria is not important, for example. While we are trying to have discussion with them to change their mind, and because we cannot be violent, we cannot fall into violence, we cannot fall into blaming. We need each and everybody to be with us and to strengthen the movement. That'll be very shortly my answer.
No, thank you very much. We appreciate that, especially in this moment where you're right. It is hard to, when we feel so overwhelmed, we feel like we need to do more and stretch. And I think that sort of drive is important, but also with the reminder to be calm and gentle with ourselves. We're still trying to connect Carine on the call. We are having some technical difficulties, so hopefully we'll be able to loop her in soon. But in the meantime, I wanted to pivot back to you, Yifat, to see if you have any reflections on what has been shared so far.
Thanks, Diana. Sure. Yeah, Aisha and Maria, and just, listening to you and thinking about the incredible work that you've done in Palestine and Syria, respectively, that Carine has done in Haiti, that other partners have done in other parts of the world. And a strategy that I think is going to become very relevant to us here, which is about kind of overriding the fact that we do not have momentum at the national level for what we want to see. And it's a bitter reality to face, but I think we've all faced it in the last couple of weeks. And what I have seen you do in your contexts is something really incredible, which is just to, again, override that reality and build out the kinds of societies that you want to see, even at the most local level, even if it's something, really partial, like how are we educating kids in this pre-K that we're going to fund for displaced people? It almost doesn't matter what the context is. I think that we have available to us the option to do that and to prefigure like how we want things to be, even in this moment when we know how far things are from what we hope for. So I feel like as the federal government gets worse and worse, which we're all anticipating, we are going to need to be able to work more at, for example, the state and local levels. And those are contexts in which we will be able to win policies to minimize damage, and also, really importantly, to create some proof of concept for the approaches that we want to see. Things like sanctuary cities for immigrants and reproductive rights protections enshrined in state constitutions, or local environmental initiatives that build up what's kind of getting called like Green New Deal from below, right? So I would say, like, let's make the most of that strategy. And I think we have some really great models and role models in the partners that we've worked with who have really built the conditions that they want to see, from the ground up in some very tough circumstances.
Thank you for that reflection, Yifat. I believe, here we have Carine. Welcome, Carine. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without some technical difficulty, right? But
Exactly.
thank you very much for joining. We have introduced you and shared your bio, and we were just having a bit of a conversation about our first question about this moment, this post-election moment here in the US, where we're grappling with its implications locally and with its global impacts. If I could jump right to you, Carine, and ask, what is your reflection on what this moment requires from us as feminists and as human rights activists?
As you know, hi everyone. I apologize again for not being on Zoom technical difficulties. But, I think at this time for many of us sitting in the US, including myself, who understand the kind of global impact of this new Trump administration being just really very scary. But I think for all of us, as individuals, certainly for myself, it's this process of grief, right? And I think it's important for us as feminists, as advocates, as allies to kind of recognize that and recognize that as we prepare for the battle ahead, because I think it's certainly a battle, it's how do we also resource ourselves, right? Through this process of shock and, it's kind of the stages of grief and depression and shock and how could this happen? And I gather, as you all have already seen, many articles have been written. I'm sure college classes will be held around how did this happen? But I think it's important to also center the fact that Americans voted for this. As much as we can't believe in it and we're in shock, the reality is that Americans voted, and it's important for us to confirm and cement that so everybody is kind of on the same page of what this reality is of a Trump administration, and that just issues around global engagement that's going to change, budget cuts to the things that are so important to us as feminists when we look at sexual and reproductive health and rights, when we look at girls programming and girls education. Our next president-elect is clear about his really linear focus on a nationalistic approach, right? So in his previous administration, he spoke about, not wanting to be or pulling out of things like the World Health Organization or NATO. Certainly, we will probably see cuts to USAID and of course UNFPA that is so important, I'm sure, across the board to many of us, but certainly for us in Haiti, UNFPA is an important agency that supports family planning and reproductive rights and girls empowerment programs. So I think it's important to certainly bring that up. And the reality is that, I think a more conservative kind of anti-women, anti-feminist agenda with a Republican-led Senate is ahead of us, not to forget issues around, an anti-abortion agenda as well.
Thank you for all of that, Carine. It's a sobering but important assessment that you just shared with us. For the next discussion question, one of the really important things that we wanted to open up for this space is the opportunity for us to learn from each other. I think, Maria, you'd said earlier, it's like maybe it's time for, when we show up for each other across borders, like what does it look like for us to learn from the experience of partners from all around the world so that you all are showing up and sharing your insights with us. So our next big question is, what would you like to share? What is like one or two important things that you would like to share with people in the US as they face this historical moment? It could be a lesson, a reflection, a memory, a warning, a piece of advice, however you want to respond. But what is, an important thing that you would like to share with our audience as we're looking to the months and years ahead? Maybe Aisha, once again, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you again. I think in this historical moment, not inside or the state, but all over the world, the United policy effects and its impact all over the world. So I think for us as a feminist and women activists, we have to commit first to commit in dialogue. So dialogue everywhere would be the first step to understand or to clarify what's going on, why this guy like Trump coming back to the White House. Second, I think in MADRE and its partners, we have to stay informed and to update our information about what's going on, not just hearing the news and believing in gossips and rumors. We have to be informed, logical information, right information. Based on that, we have to act. And I think to prioritize our work and our impact on the and put agenda for us and not going to be like catching everything in everywhere and talking about many topics at the same time. So we have to prioritize our impact. And I think from my own experience, it's to lean on the community and on women in need, on in women and vulnerable communities. It's the most important things. We have to dig deep in the local community and find the women and girls, all the other people, and recruit them to our side and explain to them why and how this kind of elections or anything affects their life, their rights, their belief. So it's not because we are women, it's because we have new generations, we have to build for them a hope and at least a safe future.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you very much. I'll pass to you next, Maria, perhaps, if you could jump in.
Thank you. I might repeat some of what Aisha have said, and also, yeah, I think I have 3 points that are very much linked to what Yifat have presented in terms of protection and really community mobilizing to ensure protection and believe on everyone power. I think we have learned, we have been with MADRE supporting a campaign against child marriage in Lebanon. And I don't know if anyone can imagine a most vulnerable situation that a refugee woman in camps in Lebanon who doesn't have any right, and like 20 of them came together, girls and women, and were able over years to stop more than 500 child marriage. This is our success that we need to celebrate. This is a small success that we need to remember and to celebrate, because we need to celebrate through the year that are coming small successes. And they are maybe small successes for some of us, but they are huge successes. This means protecting people's life and girls' life for a better future. Also, why I wanted to speak about imagining a new future or transformative future. I remember an Iraqi parliamentary woman who told me, like, I think something like 8 years ago, something that became, like, for me, very important, even kind of mindset. She told me, like, we fight against Saddam Hussein for more than 20 years, and when he fall, we were not prepared. And that is something very, very important. Sometimes we want to resist, we put all our energy to resist, and we forgot to build an alternative. And that is something very, very important. Building an alternative, it's about the future we want, but it's also about building a future that is attractive for everybody, even from people from the other side. And here come my third point will be advocating for everyone's rights. I have learned this from working a lot with families of the missing persons in Syria. They are looking for the missing person from every side of the conflict, even if there are people who are engaged in the disappearance of their own son, because they want a new future for everybody. They don't want the Syrian children to suffer the same things. So this is a future that we want to share, even with people that we disagree with, even with people who have advocate against us. And that is something very important, because this is not for me, and maybe it's not the right place to say it like this, but it is not always black and white. We need to keep trying to get people and to, yeah. I think I will stop here but I think that I hope my message is clear.
Yes, yes, thank you for that. It's about having each other's backs, even in these complicated moments, right? So then, yeah, Carine, I'll pass to you for the final word on this question.
Sure, thank you, and I really appreciate Aisha and Maria. I think at this time when often we feel so worn out. I'm worn out. I don't know about people are feeling, but it's kind of like, okay, we need to reset and we need to get going. And there's a lot to be done. But I do appreciate what Maria said, particularly in what I had in my notes is, I think it's time for us to reset and think about the way forward, but still look at the successes that we've had. Without feminist agenda, without, women really fighting, we've really had a lot of successes globally in different places, be it around, women's access to vote or sexual freedom, reproductive rights. And I think, really looking at feminist principles around building community. And I always say that women are women everywhere, in Haiti, women are displaced now. They're dealing with issues around violence. They, don't have access to normal economic independence because there's issues around, transportation or getting access to those goods. What I just said could probably be spoken about women around the globe in different places. So I think the importance of building unity, being collaborative in our approach, and having organizations like a MADRE to kind of always bring us together, to have collective thought. Because oftentimes the problem may be a little bit different, but the solution could potentially be with others, right? With other women around the world who are dealing with many of the same issues. So I always go with, women are women everywhere. We're more the same than we are different, but I think it's also a time for us to sit and look at some of the wins that we have. How did we get here? How were we able to be successful in different ways as we begin to plan the way forward?
Thank you very much for that. In a moment, we'll have some time for more discussion and Q&A. But first, I want to turn to you again, Yifat, to see if you have any, reflections or connections you want to make to what the panelists have shared for this last round of questions.
Sure. Thanks, Diana. Yeah, I mean, Carine, I feel you, like when you say, it's like we have to get going and we're already worn out. I think that like a lot of people are kind of feeling that. And I think, yeah, that we kind of need to acknowledge that in order to move through it. So I'm glad you said it. And I think that we understand that like we kind of are going to need to pace ourselves and rely a lot on each other. And each other is a very big collective. It's all of us on this call, and it's the rest of the MADRE partners, and every person on this call. I know that so many of you are with us in this work, that you're also in your own ways, activists, whatever that means to you. And that could be something that you're doing at the most local level or for your day job or whatever. But like, we've got each other, and that is going to be really, really vital. The one other thing that I was thinking about listening to all of you talking is just, kind of how we can find kind of like opportunities within this really bleak future that we're looking at right now, at least medium-term future. And because I think we've all seen, right, that when things become very destabilized, yes, we need to do damage control and protect people who are in harm's way from that destabilization. But we also need to be alert to kind of strategic openings, like when things fall apart and systems that, let's face it, are not great systems to begin with, in many cases. Are being dismantled and things are rocky, it is an opportunity to try to get in there and make change. And we do have to take every single opportunity, that we can. So, we were talking before, for example, about the vote yesterday in the Senate to block the sale of offensive arms to Israel, right? So this was a historic rebuke of kind of the US military first kind of foreign policy. And I think it was like 19 Democrats that broke ranks with the administration to say, no more like blank checks for war crimes and for ignoring what the majority of the US public wants, which is to not be sending weapons to Israel that we know are used against families and aid workers. So that resolution did not pass yesterday, but it was a really like an unprecedented step for us to build on. And what we're building towards, I think, is like that need to end impunity for human rights abuses perpetrated by US allies with US support. And to me, like, of course, I would rather that the resolution passed and there was an arms embargo right now. But I do think what we can grab onto from yesterday is that it is possible to plant the seeds and cultivate some new norms in US foreign policy and in all policies in general. And the more kind of destabilized things get, the more strategic openings there are. So we need to be judicious about like finding where we can influence and how we can leverage some of the very big changes that are on the horizon.
That's actually a perfect transition, Yifat, because there's actually a question in the Q&A box that kind of riffs off of that about where can we find opportunities even in these restricted and dark times. So I want to pose the question to the panelists to see if you have other thoughts on that about, are there examples from your work perhaps where you've been able to seize an opportunity or make greater strides than expected initially? That we can learn from now. Where are you seeing those possibilities?
I think for me, it's not always necessarily formal, right? Women have a way of being able to gather and to connect with one another, which I think is key to our being successful. And so I think spaces like this, conversations like this, and then for many of us who participate in or are members of related networks or other, membership organizations that allow us to continue to share information or to gather information or to strategize around a particular issue. I think having those opportunities is really key and important. It's important that organizations like MADRE continue to do that, but those who fund women's rights across the world and who want to support women, this is not the time certainly to kind of back down. And in fact, this is the time to kind of look at and reflect on maybe their approaches and strategies to see how to reinforce opportunities for collective thought and collective impact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Maria.
Thank you. I already gave that example of women, families searching for the missing in Syria, who are for me like the best, really example of gathering and coming together despite like a lot of challenge, despite the pain, the anger, and some of them have lost hope. They know that their husband, their sons, sometimes their girls have been killed, but they continue for others. I also give that example from the child marriage campaign. So, yeah, there is a lot of example, and I think even in the US, I was looking like I was so admiring the Woman March. So I think there is a lot of movement already going on, but we need to keep hope. Maybe as Aisha said, we need to keep the energy, and we don't always need to formalize, as Carine says, because I think we have spent a lot of energy trying to formalize platform and sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes informal way goes better. They are more organic. They continue better. So yeah, I would say use every space, because also what is important for me to say that use every space because you will discover that you are not alone. Like the number of meetings that me or my colleague went to and spoke about Palestine or about Palestine lately, that as main subject, where we thought we were alone, and then like people start coming to us and say like, thank you, like we believe what we were not able to say the same. So it is important to stay vocal, be smart, be very smart on the way you express things. And yeah, having a human rights discourse is the main thing that gather people to gather people together. Yeah.
I think from Palestinian conditions and the state conditions, one thing in Salon Plus we are discussing repeatedly on these days. It's a plan or a strategic plan, not waiting for what's going on or what's the results of the events or elections or war in the world. So we have a plan for good things. If it happens, it's good. And for the worst impacts or circumstances coming through these ways. So most of the time, we are as women and feminists in Palestine, we are waiting from others to us or to have, as you know, the Palestinian parliament collapsed since 2006. So there is the Abbas, President Abbas, he's the only one have to put the rules and regulations. Even in these days, during the war, the teenager marriage coming back and increasing in even the legislation, the Palestinian legislations, it's allowed just above 18 years. But unfortunately, they coming back to do all these things. So for women, it's not sometimes just talking about the public stage that about democracy, about building the political parties or communities. Sometimes, most of the times, as a grassroots, we are working in the community and understanding closely what the women need. Because it's not just understanding our needs and but defend our rights. I think it's the most important thing. And there is hundreds of things in and there is a variety between one community and the other, even in the other communities. But we can find a basic work on, and we find sometimes the big issues doesn't show us the small things that the women are going through. So I know it's a big things to have and regulations and human rights and supporting women here, all the community. Sometimes keep the hope in our selves and inside ourselves and our working coming from the within. We have to celebrate the small things that we even it's thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. I think that perspective of being really centered on grassroots priorities, grassroots communities, not only for clarity about what we need to be prioritizing, but also for resilience, for understanding who are we connected to and who can support us in difficult times at the grassroots level. We do have more questions, and I want to thank the folks who did share questions that were really interesting in the chat here, but unfortunately we have more questions than we have time. And so we will need to wrap, but we will be sharing more information following up on this. So thank you very much for everyone who joined us and who plugged into this conversation today. And I'll pass to you, Yifat, for the final word, please.
Thanks, Diana. Yeah. I guess I'm smiling thinking of what you just said, Aisha, celebrate the small things. I think that's going to be a good takeaway for all of us to keep ourselves going. And I want to wrap up by just sharing 3 things that I would really like to ask each of you to do to prepare for the challenges ahead. And the first one is just to remember that like this is one world. And I think when our own contexts become, really, really agitated, we can kind of lose sight of the big picture. But all of us are interdependent. And it's not just people in our local communities who are going to be put in danger. It's people all over the world. And a lot of them are already in that situation. So when you think about taking care of each other as a kind of watchword, each other is everyone. And that doesn't mean that you yourself have to take care of every person in the world or everything, right? You can rely on MADRE and the incredible global network of women's rights activists that are, as you heard, caring for people and the planet in communities all around the world. The second thing I want to ask for is please join us in taking a stand against a really dangerous new bill that would allow the Trump administration effectively to shut down the work of any nonprofit that they want without due process, without evidence of wrongdoing. So you may have already heard of this. We're going to be sharing more as this bill moves through the Senate. And I want to ask you to take action when that comes your way, because defeating this is going to be a really important victory for us. And finally, I hope that you'll consider making as generous a contribution as you possibly can to the work that we're doing together. We at MADRE are making an effort to send as much support to our partners all around the world as we can in the next 2 months before Trump is inaugurated. We are totally committed to continuing our grant making next year and beyond, but we also know that it's likely to become more complicated. So the more money we can raise now, the more we can resource grassroots women's organizations all around the world to be ready for what they'll likely face in the years ahead. So I just want to remind everyone that, the best way to avoid feeling helpless is to help someone. And I want to thank you in advance for your support and for being part of MADRE, because as we've been saying, the way we're going to get through this is together. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Yifat.
you. Thank you.
Thank you to
Thank you.
all of our
Thank you all.
speakers.
Thank you
for
all.
being here today.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.